Well, good evening, everybody. We hope you're fine and well. Welcome to another Monday night Q&A session. I'm joined tonight by my colleague from the technical helpline, Mark Barnes-Ryder. Good evening, Mark.
Hi Sam, hi everyone.
How are you on a Monday?
Yeah, not too bad. A little bit under the weather. I had my my vaccine yesterday, and it affects some people more than others, doesn't it? So, yeah, not 100%, but I'm still here, ready to help our listeners out.
Yeah. So it's it's very true. We're of that age where we've had our jabs. I had mine on Tuesday. Mark had his on Sunday. And so yeah, it does like you say, it's affecting different people different ways. So but yeah, good. And I have to admit, I was quite excited. But let's that be for another day. Okay, so the question that we put out on social media earlier today, I think we gave people a chance to vote yes or no on it, was can I use a Type C circuit breaker in a domestic installation? So what's your initial thoughts on that, Mark? Can they use a Type C in a domestic installation?
Well, certainly. I mean, there isn't anything in BS 7671 that prohibits the use of a Type C. It's just that we traditionally, think of Type C devices where you've got any type of inductive load, and that can create a bit of inrush current. So Type Bs we think of for domestic use predominantly. Type C, you might use those where you might have perhaps lots of fluorescent lighting or small motors or small transformers, just to take account of that extra inrush current at startup. And of course Type D devices where you've got heavy inductive loads. So yeah, but you could. I think you just have to coordinate the device with the type of loads effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's nothing that says you can't use a C or a D in a domestic installation. I think it's just like you say, we're so used to just seeing Bs that it makes us do a bit of a double take if we see something other than a B. But there's nothing that precludes us from using it. So let's talk a little bit then about what are the key differences. What's the key characteristic that's different across the B, C, D range?
Well, when we talk about Type B devices, Type C devices and Type D, we're talking about the instantaneous tripping current. So with a Type B device, that will trip anywhere between 3 and 5 times its rated current. So for a 6 amp device, it's going to be anywhere between 18 and 30 amps.
Yep.
So for a Type C device, it's between 5 and 10 times its rated current. So, if you were talking about a 10 amp breaker on a Type C, that will trip anywhere between 50 amps and 100 amps. So, and so on. So with a Type D device, you'll trip anywhere between 10 and 20 times its rated current. I mean, we have to bear in mind that the higher up the current rating you go, it has that adverse effect on the opposite effect on ZS. You start to restrict yourself with circuit ZS, don't you? So that could be a limiting factor, to choose your device.
Yeah. It's quite a key point, isn't it? That although a Type C for the same rating as a Type B will give you a higher current before it operates, in order to achieve that higher current, you've actually got a tighter ZS to achieve. So sometimes, because of, for example, the length of your circuit, you might not be able to use a Type C, and then you would have to go to a Type B, which has got a larger ZS to achieve. So yeah, it is a consideration. But yeah, as you rightly said, the key thing is that it's all about the instantaneous current for instantaneous operation. And you can calculate them, can't you? You can the figures that are in table 41.1 sorry, 41.2 are calculable. There's a nice calculation that you can do to arrive at them.
There is. So are we talking now for sort of because obviously the preferred devices are in the table, aren't they? But are we talking now where you've got non-preferred current ratings or non?
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that there's only a certain the typical or standard range values are shown in the table, and you can get non-standard if you like, although they're still they're accepted by 60898. But you can get 3 amp devices, you can get 15 amp devices. So, but yeah, it's just that there's a calculation that you can do. So the classic example of, you know, we take a fair few calls where we get, oh, I've left my regs book at home in the van, the dog ate it, can you help us out with maximum ZS? So yeah, although we're happy to do that, you can actually calculate it. So I'll try and show us a screen that shows us how we can calculate those maximum ZS values. So if we take a look, we've got an example calculation for a type B, and then we can compare it with an example calculation, same rating, 6 amp, but for a type C. So if we look at a type, well, let's do the type B first. Let's have a look. So if we see get your right screens in order.
So just want to remind people that it is the instantaneous tripping that we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're not talking about short circuit.
Okay. Yeah, so it's basically a calculation where we've got our voltage on the top of a fraction, and we've got the rating at the on the bottom of the fraction. So on the top of the fraction, you're going to have 230 volts times 0.95. So that's your 230 volt value for your UO, your voltage to earth, multiplied by 0.95, and then the bottom of the fraction you'll have 6 amp if that's the rating, and you're going to times that 6 by 5, which is the maximum for a type B. So you'd have 230 times 0.95, and then on the bottom you're going to divide that by 6 times 5, which would be 30. That would give you your value for a type B. And then the only difference then with a type C, again on the top of your fraction you have 230 times 0.95, but this time on the bottom of the fraction you've got 6 amp for the rating multiplied by 10, because a type C can take between 5 and 10 to trip. So you can actually calculate those values, and it's a nice logical method that you can use to do it.
And we just the 0.95 is for the to take account of the voltage fluctuations at the you know, transmitted voltage or the generated voltage level, isn't it? We use that C-min factor of 0.95, so that's why we have to times it by that factor.
Yeah.
Because that'll take account of the lower voltage level.
Yeah, so which was introduced in one of the amendments in the 17th, isn't it? We never used to use a C-min value, but that got introduced. So yeah, it's useful to know, and it really was. I always remember it was one of those light bulb moments for me when I found out how those values are actually arrived at, and the fact that you can calculate them. Okay, let's see what questions we've got coming in through the chat room. Can we still use AC RCBOs or can we not? And I think that's a follow-up to a question on, hate to bring this up, but for the love of God, please give some clarity on type AC and type A for domestic properties. And there is an LOL at the end of it. So
yeah, okay.
I think the first thing I would say is the regs themselves, BS 7670, 7671, still say that type ACs are acceptable for general use. So there's nothing currently to say that you can't use ACs. But I think our advice would be you've got to give consideration to any potential loads that might export DC leakage current into the installation. So yes, you could still fit ACs, but it would be worth asking, worth getting knowledge about what's going to be used. If you wanted to make it perhaps a little bit more future proof and versatile in terms of the types of loads, you might consider a type A, because obviously that will cope with DC currents up to 6 milliamps. But yeah, if we were to visit an existing installation that had only type ACs, we do all our relevant testing and confirm that the ACs are still operating correctly, then there's nothing to suggest otherwise, that they're faulty, that they're going to create hazards. So if you were to do your test, for example, and find that they weren't tripping, perhaps because something on the circuit is providing enough DC current to blind them, then it would be a strong consideration to try a type A and retest. Okay, but there's nothing that says you can't use ACs. Strong consideration to think about A's going forward, and I think in general the industry's going that way. So at the moment, A's are well introduced and growing. So as standard assemblies of pre-built consumer units with RCDs in place get changed and get sold, I think we'll see A's overtake ACs. So A's will become the norm just through time. Anything else you'd add to that, Mark?
The only thing I would add is increasingly, we talk about it a lot, it is down, if you've got a genuine concern, then you would possibly try to measure the amount of DC current that's acting on that installation under normal operating conditions. And I think, increasingly we'll be buying these little clamp meters that can save you such a lot of time, and they can really make you have a good day, because there's nothing worse than trying to guess at something like that, and that it's just not workable. But as Sam says, AC RCDs, I mean, they're still in a lot of households. A lot of households have got perhaps some LEDs, and that's probably about it in reality. So it is, it's worthwhile assessing that load. I mean, it's different if you're going to be doing a lot of refurbishment work or upgrade work, then I think you'd put them in. That's your chance to put them in from the off. But if you're trying to maintain an efficient sort of cost-effective installation, if you like, where you're looking at reusing those, then certainly you'll need to assess the load, and you'll need instrumentation to do that.
Yeah, it's very true that a small amount of testing to see if there is DC leakage current will pay dividends, and I think it's one of those conversations that you have with your customer in terms of it's an option. There is a slight difference in price, but it will be a consideration of what the benefits are, and to hopefully encourage the customer to see that the benefits outweigh the cost, and in terms of, if you like, future proofing, not perhaps the best word, but if you want to future proof and you want to give people the most enhanced degree of protection, then an A is going to give you that, because it will do everything that an AC does plus a bit more. We'll take another one from the chat room. So this one is around a main cable to feed a whole house is about 80 meters long. Its 16 mil cross sectional area is measured ZE is 0.44. Is it acceptable or not? Okay, so first thing that springs to mind is we haven't actually been told what it's protected by, so we don't know whether we've got a 100 amp or an 80 amp or a 60 amp, but certainly that's got to be compared against the maximum ZS. 80 meters is a long run, although 16 mil tails have got a nice current carrying capacity and low resistance. Possible volt drop issues on such a long length, but again that'll be very dependent upon the current that it's carrying. So I think to answer your question, it's one of those ones where we'd need a little bit more information. So is it acceptable? Well, first thing is you've got to be able to meet the ZS of your protective device. You've got to meet the overcurrent protection granted by your protective device, and if this is the main incoming distribution circuit, which I'm guessing it is, you've got to consider volt drop, because that's going to have a detrimental effect then on all the volt drops of all your final circuits leaving the board as well. Anything else you'd add to that, Mark? It's 80 meters long, 16 mil tails, ZE is 0.44.
So we don't know if the question relates to the size of CPC then, the Earth. Presumably it's going to have 80 meters of protective conductor, but we don't know if that's the question either, though, do we? Certainly 80 meters is really, really long. You will be governed by your voltage drop. If you can meet your voltage drop requirements, then generally everything else will follow on. You will need to consider the size of the CPC for that distribution circuit. So you need to meet the requirements of either table 54.7 or use the adiabatic. But yeah, you will be restricted on your ZS for that length of circuit. Depends on the load, depends on the load that's expected to supply, isn't it? Because that'll affect your voltage drop.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very much so. So yeah, a few more bits of information needed really to give a full and final answer on that one. But yeah, you certainly need to check ZS, check volt drop, check current carrying capacity, check overcurrent protection for the cable as well. A very quick one. Any discussions about possibility of tech talks later this year? I think we're still waiting. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen when lockdown rules relax. So no decisions made as yet. Still a possibility. We're definitely aiming to continue the Monday night sessions and the Wednesday night sessions. I think we've got strong plans to take those past the middle of the year. So just stay informed by us, and we will be letting you know as soon as we're going to start any of the real life events again. Cooker isolators, installing them in a cupboard under the worktop. What's your thoughts on installing them in regards to building reg? Cooker isolators, Mark, installed within the kitchen units.
Yeah, I mean we had that question a few weeks back, and there is BS 7671 doesn't prohibit that. The isolator needs to be either obvious by its position as to the circuit that it's protecting or isolating, or if it's put elsewhere, then it needs to be suitably labelled. And we would say as long as the isolator is correctly mounted on a hard surface, and any of the cabling to it is suitably protected against any external influences, then then it can be. I mean, we do generally recommend that if it's going to go inside a cupboard, then it should be accessible inside that cupboard and not sort of shoved to the back, because then otherwise you'll find that everything else is put in that cupboard and you won't actually be able to get to the isolator. I mean, it would help to have a label on the fuse board, actually, because anybody else that comes in to maintain that installation, they'd like to know. They're not always obvious, you see. That's what I've found in my experience. You know, you can spend half an hour looking for an isolator. So they need to be labelled.
I think it's one of those things, when it's not visually associated with the appliance that it's isolating, then labelling definitely helps, because it will prevent it being inadvertently operated. There is some guidance on that on Electrical Safety First, isn't it? It's one of their frequently asked questions.
Oh yes, I believe it is. Yeah. It's on as you say, Electrical Safety First, on the we call it RAG, don't we? Wiring Regulations Advisory Group. I don't know the number off the top of my head. But,
8. We wouldn't expect, but it's a good source, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people are well aware of the best practice guides, which are freely downloadable. Well, in the same area for professional resources, there's 2 sets of frequently asked questions. One associated with new installations, and one associated with inspection and testing. And yeah, there's a search in there, so you could put in the search bar isolators, and it will bring you up all the frequently asked questions about isolators with their relevant answers. So again, a very good source of information. And I know that's one of the questions that's covered. Can we fit isolators and accessories in kitchen units?
Yeah, and the web address for that is electricalsafetyfirst.org.uk. I think you can get to it also from the customer portal. It can direct you to there, but you can go direct to the website, and as Sam says, click on professional resources and click on BS 7671 wiring regulations, and then from there you'll be navigated to the 2 sections.
Yeah. Okay. Another one that that's a common question. ZS readings higher than the maximum ZS values. Will RCBOs comply with 1667? So I guess, to sort of paraphrase that, it's saying if my ZS measured ZS is greater than the maximum ZS of my overcurrent protective device, my fuse or my breaker, can I use an RCD or an RCBO to give me Earthful protection? Two-part answer. Yes, you can, because in certain installations you have to do that. So if we look at a typical TT installation, where the resistance associated with the earth electrode is going to be high, so that it prevents you meeting the ZS of a breaker or fuse. So in that type of situation, you have to rely on an RCD or an RCBO to give you ADS under Earthful conditions. So yes, it is acceptable, but I think we'd always recommend doing a bit of a sanity check. Why can't you meet the ZS? Why is it high? You can do checks. You can do your ZE measurement, your R1 plus R2 measurement. Compare that with your measured ZS. Is that making sense? And then your measured R1 plus R2, does it reflect the cable size and the estimated length of run? So again, if you meet all those sanity checks, so it's justifiably why it's high, i.e., it might be quite a long circuit with a small cross-sectional area cable, so you can justify why it's high, then yeah, it'd be certainly acceptable to protect it with a residual current device. But what you've got to say to yourself is, if I can't explain why it's high, how can I be sure that it's not going to get any higher? So an RCD might protect it today, but it might not protect it next week, next month, next year. So that's why I think the recommendation is do that sanity check.
Yeah, there is a reg as well, that 415.1.2, I think, that says, I think that's the reg that says that you know shouldn't rely on the sole use of an RCD. As you say, Sam, do the sanity checks, because there could be an underlying problem which needs to be, you know, investigated and rectified, you know, later on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So although we might be curing a symptom, not the problem, if we just put it on there. So we've got to make sure that there isn't a problem. Okay, let's have a look what else we've got then. ZS readings, that's the one we just did. How do we test for DC leakage? Yeah, as somebody's put, you can buy meters now, clamp meters, so they're inobtrusive. You don't need to disconnect anything, and you can put clamp meters around single conductors to see. You can also, of course, do you know, put it round a line and neutral to see if there is an imbalance, which would generally be a CPC current. So there are meters that you can buy now, not too expensive either, the clamp a DC clamp meter, so well worth having a look round that. Let's have a look. What have we got in here? Just there's a lot of people actually very well responding to the previous question to help out, so that's all good stuff. So I'm just trying to find a new question. Please advise the link for RAG. So what we'll do is we'll put the links out on RAG through social media tomorrow. I'm also going to put the example calculations, because they didn't seem to want to load at my end, so we'll get those example calculations for ZS out to you through social media tomorrow. So have a look back tomorrow at the same method that you used today.
Yeah, and can we just say, Sam, there is that old article, isn't there, the old connections article that gives an example of that calculations as well for those that are interested. Winter 2003/04 is the connections article that can talk about non-preferred current ratings and calculating ZS.
Yeah. So time after time I keep hearing that if it complied with the regs when the installation was first done, you can leave it, mainly regarding the use of RCDs, RCBOs on light and power in domestic dwellings. If an EICR was carried out, for example, me personally would always upgrade to meet the current regs, of course, for safety. What are our views? It's a fair question. I think in general, the first thing to say is there's a statement at the front of the regs which says just because installations have been designed and installed to a previous version of the standard, it doesn't make them unsafe. So quite often we take the opportunity to enhance things when we reissue or update the regulations. So they're not always done because the previous version or previous requirements were bad, but it's just that we're enhancing protection. So, you know, classic example is we already had fault protection. The introduction of additional protection provided by an RCD was seen as an enhancement. So that's one of the sort of key areas that I think, if we, in general terms, if we look at an older installation that perhaps doesn't have additional protection, so it doesn't have RCDs protecting the lighting circuits, it doesn't have RCDs protecting cables buried in walls, then we wouldn't see them as unsafe, providing, of course, you've still got adequate fault protection through the breaker or fuse. So that would be one where we would say it's a recommended improvement to bring it up to current standards, give it that enhanced protection, but it's not unsafe for the users of the installation. But then there are other areas with regards to RCD where, you know, prior to the suggestion or the requirement for RCD protection in a bathroom, we used to use supplementary bonding because it was an area of greater perceived risk. So we had, if you like, additional protection provided by supplementary bonding. So that's one where we say, okay, circuits serving the bathroom, if we've got adequate supplementary bonding and there's no RCD, we would still consider it a C3. But if we haven't got adequate supplementary bonding and we haven't got RCD protection, then that's when we'd look at it as a C2. So there's one of those areas where we already had a method of additional protection in the form of supplementary bonding before RCDs came to be a requirement. So that's then where we look at, okay, so supplementary bonding should have been installed before RCD. So if there's no supplementary bonding and there's no RCD, then we believe that that's a greater risk due to the location, so hence the C2.
There's the can we talk about the other classic, Sam, where you might have an older protected device, and at the time the installation was put in, the disconnection time was perhaps slightly higher or slightly lower? Well, I think what we generally say is that providing you can meet the disconnection time at the time that it was designed for that device, then again it wouldn't necessarily make it unsafe. It would make it a non-compliance with the current version of BS 7671, but as long as you can achieve your disconnection time at that time that the installation was put in, because we often say that the regs are not retrospective. Yeah. It's just that in those instances that we've just talked about with RCDs and with the device that I've just talked about, not having a different disconnection time, where it relates to safety, we do have to make sure that either it complied at the time or it's going to comply now. If that's help to clear that up, hopefully.
Couple of questions. We do work on some unmanned water treatment sites occasionally. We can't get access to the mains origin, so can't complete the online cert. How do we get round this? So if we're looking about recording the characteristics at the origin, it does say that we can do that through measurement, through observation, inquiry, or through inquiry. Yeah. So that would be at one of those instances where, in advance, ask the questions. Will I have access to the intake? If the answer comes back no, can you provide me with details from a previous certificate or condition report? So, and if they can, then you can use those. It's worth recording on your certificate or condition report that they were obtained by inquiry and reference the original source, but yes, it is acceptable, because it's quite often, the classic is we've got a production facility, so we're not going to be able to turn everything off and disconnect the ZE, but it was done at the last summer shutdown. So we can take it from that, making reference to the time and the date that it was recorded, just in case things have changed since. But yes, it's perfectly acceptable to get it through inquiry.
And that also takes account of when sort of maintenance has been carried out, and they might have changed the transformer tappings or something like that, which has the effect on the ZE and the voltage. So at some point, that information does need to be found.
Yeah. It has quite often. We get the conversation about, well, I wasn't able to get into the intake, so can I still continue? And it's possible, but you've got to think about to yourself, well, okay, if I can't get into the intake, so I can't confirm what type of earthing arrangement is, how am I going to be able to confirm that my bonding is going to be correct? Or do I just bond everything to the worst case, 50 mil, and then I know I'm covered regardless of the earthing arrangement? So if you don't know and you're doing some installation work, then you've got to think about, okay, what's the impact of the information on at the origin, and how does that impact the work that I'm doing? If it doesn't, for whatever reason, depending upon what you're doing, then that's fine. But if it does, then you've got to think about, okay, well, do I cater for worst case, or do I say, do you know what, it's not practical to continue until I've got that information? So yeah, it's a conversation to have with your customer or responsible person. Time's rattling on again, so we'll just take a last one. There was one that caught my eye there. BS7671 says you don't have to fuse down a cable on a known load, i.e. a cooker, but the installation guide of the manufacturer advises a fuse connection unit. What are your views to follow? So yeah, I think this is with reference that there is a regulation that says I can admit overload protection if it is a known load, a fixed load, so it's not going to generate an overcurrent. But in certain instances, as the question says, the manufacturer of the appliance or the manufacturer of the load will give a installation guide which says it wants it fused down. What are your thoughts initially on that, Mark?
So, I mean, initially I would say follow the manufacturer or take account of manufacturer's instructions, regulation 134.1. And we generally advise on the helpline to take those into account. But you're quite right saying where there's no chance of an overload situation, and so when we talk in fixed loads like showers and cookers, generally lots of stuff, lighting for example, they're all fixed current using equipment, and no chance of overload. The most common fault would be an earth fault. Yeah, so where we've got those fixed resistive loads that they're not going to change, they've got a fixed resistance, so they're always going to pull the same current based on the same voltage, so it's not an issue. Things like motors are different, because if a motor mechanically jams, that can actually pull more current. So yeah, it does depend very much on the load. But yeah, I think you're spot on in that one of our fundamental regs says we should take consideration of manufacturer's instructions. So I think that's a strong consideration, unless you've got a very good reason why not to. And also it can then also have an effect on things like warranty of the appliance. If you've not followed the manufacturer's instructions for installations, you could run into problems, not 7671 problems, but problems associated with the appliance and its warranty or any maintenance agreements that you might have with it. Okay, well, we've steamed through another session. This is always the quickest half hour of the day, of the week. It's incredible how it goes. So I don't know what you feel, but I'm always amazed at how quickly half an hour goes, Mark. Yeah, no, I think the same. It's the quickest half hour of my life. It's no sooner have you sat down than you're sort of getting back up again. But yeah, I mean, keep the questions coming. We like the questions. That's what we're here for. And if we can help you, then even better. Yeah,
there's been a few questions in the chat about do we store all the unused questions? Obviously, we only get limited time on a Monday night. We do try and pick the questions that we haven't answered and try and encompass them into future sessions. At the moment, we're absolutely flooded on the helpline. We've had to double up the amount of people responding to emails. We're getting an extra 100 calls a day, predominantly around PRS and EICR codes. So unfortunately, we won't be able to respond individually to the questions in the chat tonight. But what I will guarantee is that we always look to review them to see if there are common themes, and then we try and bring those common themes out either in the following Monday session or put them forward to issues around that we can present in the wire. So that's why we had an awful lot of questions about test and inspection, and we've concentrated very heavily on that in the wire sessions on Wednesday nights. So I hope you still find it useful. So yes, please do keep asking questions, because it helps us to create content. I do apologise we can't answer them individually, but certainly we always try and pick up as many as we can on a Monday night. So that's goodbye for me. Thanks everyone. Hope you stay safe and well, and things start into I think next Monday is another one it's a big date on Boris's roadmap, isn't it? The 29th of March. So hope everyone stays safe till then, and then life gets a little bit better and a little bit easier. You want to say good night and any last words, Mark?
No, it's just except to say good night to everybody, and thanks for tuning in as always. And yeah, just to reiterate your words, Sam, to stay safe, and hopefully things will get a bit easier from the 29th. We'll wait and see on that one.
Yeah, and we will. So we'll post the examples of calculations on social media, and we'll post the details of the RAG, the Wiring Regs Advisory Group frequently asked questions. Very, very good source of information. Okay, so thanks very much for your attention, and hopefully we'll hear from you and see you guys next Monday. Thanks very much. Bye.
Good night.